Hi everyone, good evening. Welcome to our live after 5. Today actually we had a really interesting piece in the Irish Times, actually deciding to talk about this last minute. As you know, the government are talking about bringing in some tax benefits for landlords, and I did an interview on the Irish Times today. Not actually really an interview, it was a debate, and it's all around tax breaks for landlords. And of course I decided to talk about this, and I haven't got the article out, so you can tell this is real off the cuff. Let me just find it. And it is not in... I have it. Okay, so it's page 16, the Irish Times, the debate. This is it here. Thanks, Jennifer O'Connell, for asking me to write this. Basically, the debate is, should landlords get a tax cut in the budget? And the headline is, a property agent versus an economist on whether the Minister for Housing should reduce tax on rental income. So I am obviously saying that landlords, yes, should get a tax cut, or a tax cut, I should say, in the budget. And Barra Rowntree, who is an economist and professor with Trinity, is saying no. So the start of my paragraph, I'm not going to read it all out because there's too much in it, but some 10,500 notices to quit were served to tenants in the first 6 months of 2023. The facts speak for themselves. I've listened to numerous debates over whether landlords should pay less tax on rental income and heard questions about whether landlords actually need tax cuts. They're staying in the market anyway, the argument goes. Anyway, from our experience, in the last week, we issued 15 notices to quit by landlords who have to exit the market. And as I was writing the piece, I had to actually give another notice. I've shared a story of 3 real clients, 3 small property owners who between them actually own 5 properties. All of them have had to leave the marketplace, and they're really in huge financial difficulty with their rental properties. And I'm not sure if people understand that small property owners pay tax anywhere in the region up to 58% on their rental income. And imagine then they pay a professional agent to manage it. So if the rent, for example, is €1,000, there's probably less than 400 going to the landlord. It's probably more like 350. Now, not all landlords are equal, and I would say there are some property owners out there taking the you know what. I saw on a social media page recently in West Waterford, a property owner has a house to rent for $2,500 in Dungarvan. I'm sorry, I think that is extortionately high. They also put a comment in, it's for professionals only. That's actually against the law. You can't say that. But I'm representing fair property owners. And if sometimes they're not fair, we have to outline to them what is fair and, the rules of engagement and the law. But I think there's always going to be some bad apples. But in the main, our small property owners are decent people. They are taxpayers. They have ended up with an accidental rental property, you might say housed in an accident, getting married, deciding to retain the one of the properties and renting it out. Because let's face it, it was always a good idea, because it's a great thing to have an asset, because assets increase in value. And whether the general population or not disagree or agree, we need small property owners. We need a functioning rental market for our economy. Like all the nurses and doctors, when they move to Waterford, they don't own a property, nor do they buy a property. They have to rent. We have pharma companies bringing people in. We have staff working in restaurants, cafes. We have a transient society who need to rent properties. And so if all these small property owners leave the market, it is a disaster. So I've argued the case, and I've spoken about the rent pressure zone. That is a huge issue as well. Like, the rent pressure zone came in overnight, and some really sound landlords decided that they had amazing tenants and they weren't going to increase the rent. So, for example, I've called him John. He's not really John. I've changed the names. His tenant was paying rent €90 a week. Can you believe it? The rent pressure zone came in and he was stuck with that rent. But the market rent, so he was charging $360 or $390 a month. And the market rent at that time when the rent pressure zone came in was somewhere in the region of probably $850. Now today it's probably $1,300. But even if the government brought those properties up to the market price at the time the rent pressure zone came in, it would probably entice people like John to stay in the market. Anyway, too many people don't think of how these small property owners have to manage the situation. And I know, because we manage in the region 350 properties, and we have some clients who are in dire straits and it's difficult for them. Then there are people who've done very well, and there's people who've bought in the last few years and they don't have negative equity, i.e. the value of their property worth substantially less than what they own. Also, these huge funds pay little to no tax, and they're the ones that are driving the rents in our capital. We don't have these funds particularly in Waterford or in country or outside of Dublin. They're mainly in Dublin, and that does skew the data. So I'm sorry, I do not agree with Barra Rowntree, albeit he makes some excellent points around planning permission and building new homes. I concur. Anyway, that's my bit for this evening. In the comments, I'll put a link to the article later on. You mightn't be able to open it because you have to be a subscriber of the Irish Times. Have a great evening. And as I always say, slán go fóill, and thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, get in touch.